Spring is here and it's time to start thinking about planting and maybe growing some produce in our little greenhouse. And I thought that would be a perfect opportunity to make a little gardening tool. Welcome back to Black Bear Forge. Now the tool I have in mind is something I've seen examples of online. I don't know what all the exact dimensions in these other tools, and I've never used one, so it's going to be kind of experimental both in the construction and in its use. I might decide later that it's not as practical as I'd hoped it would be. But that's a tool that has a relatively long handle, not two-handed, but for one-handed use. And the head is angled, so it's kind of like a hoe that you would use for weeding. And that means you can weed with this, you can dig with it, you can cultivate with it. And I think it'll be really good in the smaller beds of the greenhouse where you can't get big tools into. And for this tool, I thought I would start with a piece of bandsaw blade. These are giant bandsaw blades from the Pacific Northwest. And this makes pretty good material for thin tools, knives, things like that. So I've already cut a piece of this off. And it's a little bit hot still because I put it in the forge and I let it come up to heat, and I've been letting it cool with the forge. So as this cools, we'll go ahead and do a layout and we will get started on our little gardening tool. Yeah, it's not bad there. First thing I'm going to do is just kind of eyeball a center line here. And this is going to be a socket tool. So I want this to come down into here. And that will be the socket that holds it onto the handle. And then here will be the blade for digging and weeding and doing whatever we need. So the first thing I want to do is I want to cut this out, and I think a cold chisel is going to be the way to do that. And I think I'm going to go back to this set of tools to find a chisel that has a nice curve to it this way. And that way I can get around that curved section of this that allows both straight cuts and curved cuts. And you can do all of this by hand at the anvil if you need to. Don't cut all the way through to your anvil. I'm only going to cut part way through and then I'll break this off. But you can also do this under the treadle hammer. And that may be where we finish this off because it's much faster. Once you get a line established, it's much easier to follow it. And once you get a good score line going in there, it's not too hard to just break that off right there at the vise. Then we'll either file or grind that. But if you're lucky enough to have a treadle hammer, this is a great way to go. Make sure you set the safety stop so you don't accidentally smash your hand. That way I can't go any deeper than that, and if the tool kicks out, I'm not going to hit my hand. Again, don't cut all the way through. Now here's where this curved chisel comes in handy, because it will allow you to follow a curve just by taking smaller bites with it. If it's a straight chisel, you can't do that so easily. And it's not curved this direction, it's curved this direction. And again, we should be able to snap that off here at the vise. The curves are a little bit tougher, but not too bad. And if you're going to file it, you might as well just file it right now. But you can also grind that, and then also need to take this off, and I'll just do that at the grinder because it'll go really quick. So now it's time to turn this into a little gardening tool. And first thing I want to do is I want to roll this up and make a socket. The handle will go in the socket. And ultimately this is going to get bent over at about 90 degrees. And because that socket is essentially a piece of tube at that point, if you ever try to bend tube 90 degrees, it will kink and it will be flat and it will be weak, and it's going to be a place that the tool is going to break. Something bad's going to happen because of that. So as I roll that up, I'm going to insert a little piece of solid. I'll put that in right about there. Roll the socket around this, and then my bend will happen right in here. And I think that's going to make this a lot stronger, and the bend will go a little bit easier. The socket will still be kind of a weak point while I'm doing that bend, so we'll probably have to just heat that with a torch so we don't deform the socket any. I've never made one like this before, so this is a test piece, and I'm kind of making it up as we go along. So let's head over to the forge. And I'll start rolling that socket in a swedge block. Really easy to get this twisted, so go kind of slow and careful. It's worth taking the time to straighten things back out if you need to. This thin material cools off really fast, so you'll have to keep reheating quite often. Go ahead and insert my little piece of solid bar there. The ideal might be to forge weld that in there. It's a little bit awkward. And I think that's just what I'm going to try and do here. I'm going to try and drive it in a little bit further before I forge weld it. And that will guarantee that I've got plenty of material where I want it. It definitely wants to be a little bit loose in there, so it's not going to stay without some sort of welding. I suppose you could just tack weld it with a MIG welder if you wanted to. We'll see. This may not be the best way to make a tool of this sort, but so far it seems to be working. I think that we'll get that hotter before I flux it. put a little stiffening rib on the inside of the blade here, just to try and make the blade a little bit stronger. I don't know how necessary that is. This is not going to be a heavy abuse kind of tool. But it just seems like a nice touch. I think that's pretty much what I want to do as far as the tool shape goes. So far I think it's going pretty well. The forge weld worked pretty well, I think. So the next thing I want to do is I want to put a bend right through this spot right here, so that this bends up towards the socket. And luckily it's already tending to curve that way, so that shouldn't be too hard to do. So I think I'm going to put that in there. We might use a bending fork, or I might be able to just bend it with the tongs, but we will see. And I think a nice controlled heat will make this go better. Remember, this is thick, so you want to make sure you get clear down to that core. I think that's just what I want, not quite 90 degrees. I'm going to clean up that tip a little bit. It's just got a funny little curve to it that I don't quite like, but I don't think that'll be too hard to do. Yeah, I like that better. And now the socket. Actually, let's touch mark it before I do the socket, because I'll probably have to straighten something after I touch mark it. Now, if you have a bick or a beak, whatever you want to call this, it's just the right size, it's probably going to be one of the easiest ways to true this socket up at this point. This one's not quite a matching taper, but it's not bad. It's a pretty nice round socket at this point. Your other option would be just a round drift if it fits. And this one isn't bad. It's not exactly the right size, but I could probably true that up pretty well in that. Now this socket, I'm going to grind the end off to make it straight. It's probably not that big a deal, but it seems like I might as well because it'll be easy to do. But other than that, this is pretty much completed. I think I will go ahead and take the time to harden and temper this, because that saw blade is a hardenable steel. It's probably L6, which is what most of those big bandsaw blades are made out of, and that's an oil quench steel. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this back up to heat, let it normalize. I'll clean up the socket, give it a good wire brushing to clean the scale off of it, and then we'll look at hardening and tempering it real quick. I'm actually quite pleased with the way this is going. That went a lot smoother than I thought. The forge weld seemed to work very well. I don't see any sign that that pin is loose in there. Although now that it's bent, it really wouldn't hurt if it's loose. It's still supporting the tube, but it seems good and solid, so we've got a good weld. Everything is shaped the way I wanted it to. And when it's the first time you've done one, sometimes you don't get that lucky, but sometimes you do, so I'll take it. I went ahead and drilled a hole through the socket of this so I can put a pin through the handle just to make sure it never falls off. Nothing more annoying than having a tool that you're pulling with, like a hoe or a rake, and having the thing fall off. And a lot of cheap ones you buy at the local home center or big box store do that all too easily. So this one's going to get pinned on. Now I'm treating this like L6, and I usually have pretty good luck with that. The critical temperature for L6 is 1555 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to make a good guess and just judge this by eye in the gas forge. I only want to harden the blade part. I don't need to harden the bend. I don't need to harden the socket. That stuff needs to stay tougher so it can put up with some of the flex and the abuse that it might see in use. I took a little bit of time previously. I have preheated my oil. I've got the forge somewhat heated up, and I'm just going to let this soak and come up to heat slowly. And probably this will take 10 or 15 minutes. I'll let it sit for a while, get hot, turn the burner on, bring it up a little bit more, and try to get that whole blade up to the proper hardening temperature as slowly as I possibly can. That's much easier to do in the electric oven, but we'll do the best we can in the gas forge. And agitate it up and down a little bit and move it around in a circle, or figure 8 is better. And as it cools, I can quench the whole thing because it's not up to full temperature up at the socket. And wipe as much oil off as I can just so it doesn't stink up the shop any more than it already has. And just give it a quick test for hardness. It's not just glass hard, but I think for a tool like this, it's probably going to be fine. Let's get it into the toaster oven, and we're going to temper that at 450 for an hour. And then hopefully this afternoon, there will be time to put a handle on it and go try it out. So stick around for the exciting conclusion. I have a nice piece of birch that I thought I was going to use for carving spoons or bowls, but it sat around so long, it's bone dry now, and it's way easier to do spoons out of green wood. So this will make a nice handle for a little garden tool. I'm going to just kind of make a free-form oval. I'm not going to worry about it being too perfect. As you've noticed, I'm going to do it with hand tools, starting with a froe to split it, an axe to rough it out, a draw knife to get it closer, then maybe we'll go to a spoke shave. And just like with blacksmithing, I'm keeping the edges square to start with, then I'll knock the corners down to sort of an octagon, and then I'll round it up into that oval shape. That is pretty much what I'm after. So I'm going to drill a hole through here and put a pin in that. In keeping with the hand tool theme of doing this handle, we'll just drill this with a hand drill. Go from both sides to guarantee I make it through. And of course it looks like the only hammer I've got down here is a claw hammer. So I'll probably do a better job on this pin back up in the shop. But that will keep it in place. That's a good solid attachment. The handle's a little rough on the end. I'll just clean that up with a sharp knife here. Be careful doing this kind of stuff. You'll notice that my thumb is back here, and that serves as a stop. I can't go any further than this. You don't put your thumb here and cut into your thumb. But this isn't a woodworking lesson, so you have to use what you're comfortable with. There's our garden tool. Let's go try it out. Yeah, it works pretty good. It'll till the soil and break up the clumps from the last time we used this little greenhouse. So my first observation with this, though, look at that, there's a carrot. Not a very good carrot, but it's a carrot. Anyways, my first observation with this tool is that I think I would have liked it better at a full 90 degrees. I was thinking it'd be used this way more, but it really seems like it wants to dig better if it was at a 90. So I may drill that pin out and rebend that just to make it more useful. But it's an entirely functional tool, and this is really what I made it for, is doing these beds in this greenhouse. And this is a little tiny, kind of decrepit greenhouse. It's not at all like Torbjorn Amon's greenhouse, which is spectacular. But if you want to know more about this one, I did a video about it over on the other channel, and I'll put a link to that right up here if you're interested. In the meantime, I do hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. If you haven't done so already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button down there. Feel free to stick around, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends. If you'd like to provide financial support for the videos here at Black Bear Forge, there are links in the video description for both PayPal and Patreon. There's absolutely no obligation. Those are merely donations. The content is free. But in the meantime, I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but stay safe, wash your hands, and do wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one.